When is the last time you listened to a podcast about web development, web design, and small business and didn't fall asleep? Yes, we cover web development, web design, and small business, but like actual human beings with personalities. If you're a beginner, we're not going to talk over your head. It's more like asking your buddy for help. We have guests, we have fun, and let me tell you, these two can get off on a tangent. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to HTML All the Things Podcast. This is Matt Lawrence and Mike Curran.
That's it, everybody. We are back. This is the HTML All the Things Podcast. This episode, bit of a working title. We have a bunch of different titles we may use. We brainstormed a bunch, but the current working title is, Are Coding Basics Still Relevant in the Age of AI? And we are, of course, powered by CodeRabbit. Go check it out. AI Code Reviews. You can go check it out at coderabbit.ai, or there's going to be a link in the show description and in the show notes on htmlallthethings.com if you want them to know that we sent you. But anyway, you can get a 14-day free trial there. No credit card needed, and at just a 2-click sign up with GitHub and GitLab. Cut your code review time down. Go and check out CodeRabbit. Okay, so in this episode, I was thinking and kind of reminiscing and kind of questioning something that I kind of like did in my past. Now, that sounds dark and mysterious, and it was meant to be, but it really isn't that. It was literally just my high school programming course. High school programming course taught us some really old tech. And the reason why it taught us old tech is because it solidified programming fundamentals. And I want to know today whether programming fundamentals, and we'll talk this out, make any sense. Like, should you be learning programming fundamentals? So if this sounds interesting to you and you want to support the show, you can go and check us out on that Patreon, leave a review or rating on your podcast app, join us in our Discord server, or share this with your friends. And remember, you can get up to 20% off Scrimba. You can learn how to code on there, full stack courses, front-end courses, all kinds of stuff using their interactive media player code editor. Again, up to 20% off using our link, scrimba.com/links/HTML all the things. Link will be in the show description and in the show notes on htmlallthethings.com with full details on htmlallthethings.com as well. So let's kick this off here. So I'm the one that wrote this, of course. This is a bit of a personal thing for me, and I'll just kind of, go back down memory lane to high school. And in high school, we actually learned QBasic and Visual Basic. Now, you might be like, man, that's old. Like, how old is Matt? I wasn't that old. QBasic was like a dinosaur when I was there, and the version of Visual Basic we were using was also quite old as well. I want to say it was like 8 to 10 years old. The point of this, though, was that both of these technologies were outdated. That's literally the point of it, because it's close to what Mike and I have referred to as close to the metal, if you will. So what does that mean? Is it's not close to the metal in terms of the hardware. That's what a lot of hardware engineers will use. But in terms of a programming language, it's close to, I'm just gonna coin this now, I guess, the metal of the fundamentals of programming. So thinking like a computer, going through things and thinking, okay, I have a big problem. I need to break it down. I need to solve this problem. How do I solve it? Well, I've just broken down the problem into smaller problems, and now I can break these down into common programming mechanics, like using variables for temporary storage, arrays for lists, if-then statements, which are, of course, conditional statements, using those to make basic decisions, things like that. Those are programming basics, and these are things that are in virtually all, if not all, programming languages. And so by using modern technology, again, like I said, the outdatedness was the point. We didn't have any modern fluff. We weren't calling in APIs. We weren't worried about cloud computing. We weren't worried about the internet going down. We weren't worried about any of that stuff. It was, for the sake of that course, as close to the basics as possible that our instructor at the time knew, or that our teacher knew. Now, the whole reason of this episode is not to talk about QBasic and Visual Basic. That's beyond the point. What I want to talk about is we make guides for web development. Many of them are for basic coding skills, right? Something like the other day, I just put out a thing on LinkedIn talking about how font weight works for bolding text and making your text thinner and bolder, and what's the difference between sort of like the standard font weight and then using a variable font as well, things like that. But that's not really like modern web development. Obviously, font weight is relevant, but modern web development is layers deep. layers upon layers really deep. Like if you talk to somebody, I mean, and Mike will do this on this show where he'll talk about something that he's into, that he's working on, and he's throwing out acronyms and things that I don't even know what he's talking about. And I'm in this field, like I'm professionally working in this field. I just helped a customer not an hour ago, fix something on their website, and we built that website from the ground up. And I don't know what he's talking about. So there's all these layers to peel back now. And so we're so deep that we're well beyond the HTML, CSS, and JS. Or maybe I shouldn't say that we're beyond it, but HTML, CSS, and JS are like step one of like what feels like 100. And so if we take a look at like progressing in web development in terms of skill as a ladder, if we take a look at it as a ladder, it's like, whoa, like this ladder is super daunting. If you're starting all the way at the bottom of like learning programming fundamentals of like how a computer thinks and how a computer actually goes through problems, and again, using those if statements, making decisions, storing things, all those things, you're on that fundamental rung of the ladder. It's like, man, this ladder's so tall. Should I even bother starting here? Like, am I going to be climbing forever and I'm never going to get out of here? And then, of course, we also have AI coming in. Now, AI is going to be a part of this conversation. It's not going to be the only thing. So if you're an anti-AI person, again, we're going to talk about other things other than AI, of course. But another part of this conversation is AI. So AI has disrupted this space greatly. So the complexity of things has disrupted this sort of ideal, but also AI has disrupted it because it can code up apps and games with just a few prompts. And of course, those things are commonly using advanced programming concepts. And it can explain the code as it goes. If you're using AI, should you start from the bottom? Heck, if you want to get going on web development, should you start from the bottom? So that's kind of the point of this episode, and that's kind of what we're going to be like talking about.
The interesting thing is that this is like super top of mind for me because I'm learning new concepts right now. I'm essentially diving deeper into something called MCP servers, and I'm diving deeper into Python, which I don't have a lot of experience with. So I'm in a little bit of a similar position to people starting out, not from scratch, but like starting out on something. And what I've realized is that maybe to my detriment, I am relying on AI quite a lot. Now, having said that, I've talked to a few people in around me that are also learning new things and like testing stuff out. And it seems that they're kind of experiencing the same thing where like they'll go to a course or they'll go to an online tutorial about whatever, JavaScript or some sort of random topic. And they'll get like a quarter of the way through and then they go to ChatGPT and they ask it the same question that they might have asked in the course and ask it to give them a response in whatever style they need. And they seem to gravitate towards the response that ChatGPT responds with. Whether it's right or wrong, that's another issue that we can talk about. But the way that these AIs are starting to come up with responses is now learning the ways that we like to get the responses back and hitting our own dopamine cycles. And therefore, it's just people are relying less and less on tutorials and guides that are like handwritten and more on these LLMs. And I'm seeing myself go down the same path that it's tough, right? Like this, and it's a different concept to like it having write code for you from scratch. This is like learning, right? And that's what we're going to be talking about in this episode. So the learning aspect of coding is also getting disrupted in my opinion. Now, I don't think that this is like, 100% across the board. I'm sure there's tons of people. And in fact, I have statistics to prove there's tons of people that are still using traditional courses and traditional media and books and stuff like that. But I think it's slowly starting to seep into people's minds that, especially the people that are using AI a lot in other aspects of their life, that, hey, it's now become easier to get what I want out of the AI versus try to fit my own mind around a course that wasn't really created for me. It was created for the general public. Yeah, it's a fascinating topic to talk about right now because it's changing really, really quickly.
Well, because I mean, I have another personal thing that, like, to kind of build off what you said, Mike, is that like recently I said, you know what, like I wouldn't mind furthering my knowledge in like another modern, coding thing. And I've said this a million times, and I always get interrupted by some big project that comes along. But regardless, it's like, okay, another attempt. Sure, I'll like try to dive into React or Svelte or something. And so I talked to AI about it. I mean, and that was kind of a weird thing to reach out to right away. But I was like, hey, like, this is where I'm at with my skill level. And I told it, I said, I know JavaScript, I know this, I know that. I know, WordPress pretty good. I know all these other things. And I said, so I'm not a complete beginner. And we've had an episode recently about something like this where it's like how to upgrade your skills when you're not a complete beginner. I'll link that in the show notes on htmlthings.com. But the point of the matter is like, I'm not a complete beginner. And I said, if I'm going to get started on one of these things, like, should I up my, or not up, but should I practice, like just do a bit of practicing and like kind of knock the rust off my JavaScript knowledge? And it was like, yeah. And it's like, do you want a lesson plan? I said, sure. And it gave me a lesson plan, and I didn't follow it. Again, I'm just kind of like curious. And it gave me like a pretty good one. It was like, you need to, kind of recover these like 5 topics, 6 topics, whatever it is. And then you can kind of get started on something like a Svelte or like a React. I think I told it React at the time. And it's like, oh, okay, like cool. And like, again, I didn't enact anything, but it was like, okay, like these are actionable things that I can do each day, that I can go through, and I can like learn this stuff. And then I got to thinking to myself, I was like, you know what? Like, I'm itching to get going. Like what I want to do ultimately, and like everyone wants to be a master of like a craft they're interested in, of course, right? Is what I ultimately want to do is I want to just like immediately start on the project I'm doing. I want to immediately get going. And I understand that there's a process and things like that, but should you skip a step is really the question here. Because like some of these topics that it was talking to me about, obviously like I have some rust on, but I understand them. Many of them were like super simple. And then I was getting caught up on them, which sounds counterintuitive to be like, Matt, if you thought they were super simple, why were you getting caught up on them? Because it was getting deep into the theory of them, where it's talking about, these like really niche, like little theoretical things that like don't really come up in the day to day, where it's like, hey, like, this is what this does, and that's actually this type and this and that. But it's like when you're just working with it in the field, it just feels normal. But then, like, that's not the case. That's not the case. Like, in it, it was giving me the textbook case, which is very detailed. But in the field, what are you using out of the textbook 90% of the time, right? You're using like 70% of the textbook, 50% of the textbook, whatever it is, right? And so, like, that becomes like a huge issue for me personally, because it's like, hey, like, now this like refresher feels like a waste of time. It feels like I'm just like waste of time. And now I feel justified in saying, let's just get rearing to go. But then if I were to get rearing to go, the first thing I would do is immediately tell the AI, okay, I want to build this thing in React, and it would just probably build it for me. And so now you're at this crossroads where it's like, okay, like what do like where do the fundamentals fall into place? And I actually listed some stuff here because like I do think that there is still value in learning the basics, like the basic fundamentals. And basically like back in the day, like a few years ago, I guess, people who like refused to learn the fundamentals were doing a lot of like Googling, finding blog posts, finding Stack Overflow articles, especially. And then they were obviously copying and pasting. They weren't actually learning what they were doing. They were just copying and pasting all their stuff. And like the thing is like the people back in the day used to do this, right? They would like say, I want to just get going on React. They wouldn't learn what we call the 3 pillars of web development, which is HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. And then they would, dive into just React. And then they would either, kind of piece things together and just sort of figure it out. And then they would maybe slowly learn HTML, CSS, and JavaScript kind of in the background. And or like through osmosis is kind of what people will say, right? Like through osmosis, you like slowly learned all the stuff that you kind of like skipped over. But there really is, even in this AI age, even in this more advanced age where things are more complex, a great value in learning the basics and not just copying and pasting, because it's great for peer reviews, right? Like if you're working in a team, you need to do peer reviews. You need to be able to read the code. Like, sure, you could say, oh, Mike wants me to peer review him, so I'll take this and put it into the AI, or I'll take this and put it into Google and I'll Google it. I mean, sure, but like, wouldn't it be great if you could just freaking read it and like kind of do a peer review? Like, don't you want like some semblance of skill? And I feel like something like a peer review is a prime example of that, where it's like someone is sending you a document, and if that document is something that you cannot read, period, that's probably not good. And so learning the fundamentals of programming allows you to go through and be like, oh, there's an if statement here. Okay, they're making a decision. What's the decision they're making? Oh, they're using this. Okay, that's a variable. Like if you don't know those basic concepts, right? Like obviously things like peer reviews and code goes much further than, putting variables together and putting if then statements together. But for the sake of an audio show, like they're kind of a prime example of something where if someone says like if then, they're like, what is that? Like what's an if statement? It's like what's a for loop? What's a do loop? What's a while loop? What's a this? What's a that? It's like, you don't know what a loop is? Like, you can't read this. It'd be the equivalent of, Mike, if you just like decided to send me something in like Spanish. Can't read it. I can't read that. And like, if I'm a Spanish translator, I would probably want to know how to speak Spanish, but a Spanish translator could put everything into AI, but why would you do that? Like, wouldn't you want to have, again, some skill in your craft? So it's great for peer reviews, of course.
Yeah, so I kind of want to jump in right here because this is something I've come to really realize in the past week or so, is that without my base knowledge that I've already built up over the last, 10 years or whatever that we've been programming before AI came around, this part of the equation, the reviews, would be impossible. And most of what I do now as like an engineering lead and as a person that's embraced AI tools into my workflow is literally review code. So I'll get agents like Cursor Agent or Claude Code, whatever, to literally write most of my code for me. And then I will meticulously, and when I say meticulously, I'm way more meticulous than I was with a human editor, with a human coder, meticulously review the AI created code line by line and see if it fits what I want it to do. And a lot of times, not a lot of times, but like there are times pretty consistently where it will do some really effed up stuff. Like, for instance, I asked it to create a testing framework for me, right? And to test this one piece of code that I have. And it did that, but instead of testing that one piece of code, it actually wrote statically inside of like static variables the tests that it needed to run. Instead of actually testing my code, it just like was running static variables and outputting it passed. It was like going around circumventing the code that it was supposed to be testing. And I went through it line by line and I saw it and I was like, holy shit, I deleted all that. I wrote some code myself and then I'm like, no, do this. And I pointed to the actual code that it was supposed to do. And then it did it. But like without the base fundamental knowledge, I would be screwed. I wouldn't know that it did that. And I would think that everything's running fine because it's literally passing all the tests that I asked it to pass. Like it did the thing that I asked it to do to the letter of the law, but it did it in such a terrible way that it would have been completely useless. And that's happened to me on multiple occasions now.
And like obviously like using AI to help code and using AI for it to help code reviews. I'm not I'm not against that. But you had to read that and you needed the fundamentals to read that. Like I honestly think that my language translator example is actually good. I mean, obviously I'm biased because it's my example, but like effectively, I could be a Spanish translator if it's like an all digital job, an asynchronous all digital job for some reason, because I can just run it through translation software. But I mean, I'm going to be probably a lot more effective if I can just read a bit of Spanish. You know what I mean? And it's like, this is exactly what I'm kind of getting at, is that if you cannot read code, AI makes mistakes, humans make mistakes, and like I'm not saying necessarily just code reviews, I'm saying peer reviews. Like if someone comes to you and says, hey, is this all right? It's not, maybe it's not even formal. Maybe it's not even formal or documented at your work. It's literally like the newbie on the team, or even someone who's higher up comes to you and says, I'm not really sure if I did this the most efficient way, or what do you think about this? And you have to go like, well, hang on, let me plug her into ChatGPT or Cursor or something. It's like, that's probably not great that you like fully rely on that. You can't even just take a peek at it. You can't take a look at it. You're going to get outed pretty quick, right? Like someone's going to just like call you out and be like, yo, like, are you able to do this? You know what I mean? Like it's that fundamental. Because like people, I feel like the vibe coding is great. Like I'm not saying it's bad necessarily, but if you were in this trade, if I can call it a trade, if you're in this field, whatever you want to call it, you should probably know the fundamentals, and this is why, because you're gonna get called out, right? Now, the one thing I want to say is that there's a lot of different technologies in web development as well, of course. Like there's React, there's Svelte, there's Vue, there's your Svelte kit, there's your Next.js. The list goes on. There's all kinds of plugins that plug into those. If you're in the WordPress space, excuse me, even that alone, like there's a bunch of page builders, and then of course you can extend those with various APIs, SDKs, whatever, like a whole bunch of things. Obviously, WordPress is massively extendable by plugins, which those page builders are most of the time, because yes, WordPress has its own thing. But regardless, the point is that there's a lot there. And so you might say, you know what, like if I want to get, let's just say you want to get into WordPress, to change gears a little bit, I want to get into the WordPress stuff where I'm going to use their no code and their coding stuff. Like I'm going to get into Elementor. I'm going to hit Elementor hard. I'm going to learn how it works, learn all the updates, learn what their mantra is and all that. And then I'm going to find their shortcomings, or not necessarily shortcomings, but the niche things that I need. And then I'm going to code what I need into Elementor because I'm able to do that. I'm able to add my own widgets, I think they're called, or like little elements that you drag onto the page, right? I'm able to do that, right? That's great and everything, but that's a far cry from HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. But let's think for a second. Okay, you just got really into Elementor, and all of a sudden, WordPress hits rough waters. I mean, there was a bit of a scandal thing that was going on last year. We're not going to retouch on that, but just something like that. And there was people talking. Admittedly, it's just talk and it didn't happen, but there were people talking and saying, is this the end of something like WordPress? And all that time and money and knowledge and everything else that you put into that is now going to be gone. Now, that's going to be the case no matter what. However, if you have fundamental knowledge behind you, if you learn those three pillars, the HTML, the CSS, and the JavaScript, you will generally have an easier time switching. Now, obviously, with WordPress, you have to add PHP in there, because that's the back end and blah, blah, blah. And that's what WordPress runs on. And, I'm not going to get into the whole thing. But the point of the matter is that it's still like the three pillars that Mike and I always preach are still very much there. Like they're still very important, because you're able to then say like, oh shoot, like, WordPress like is going down, or Elementor is going down in this hypothetical. Okay, I guess I got to go over to the next biggest thing, which is React or whatever it is in this hypothetical situation. So then you learn React, and then you're like, okay, well, I'm not using PHP anymore. I got to learn, Next.js to coincide with in order to get like a full stack experience with my React app that I built. And there you go, right? Like, so it's just going to be a little bit of an easier transition. It's not going to be easy, and it's still going to suck because you're going to lose all that stuff. But the thing is that the browser understands HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. And so that, like, it's still a pillar, like they're still important technologies to maybe not master, but to certainly understand and know how to use them, or at the very least be like, I forget what that one method is. Let me just look that up.
It's an interesting problem that we're coming into. It's like a chicken and an egg problem. Like, I enjoy the ability that vibe coding gives people that never had an inkling for development. Like, they never wanted to be developers. They're now able to create really cool proof of concepts, I like to call them, POCs, that were not able to be created before, because A, there's just cost too much. B, there's just not enough developers out there that had enough free time to do that kind of stuff. That's a really, really cool thing that came out of vibe coding. What the problem has become is that we're expected to now use vibe coding, or like a developer that's coming up right now without the foundational knowledge is expected to use vibe coding to create an actual product that an end user is going to use. And that's where I think it still falls apart, due to what I was saying before, where it will create code and it will create some very sophisticated code. I want to be very clear here. It writes some really good code sometimes. But then it will do some really weird things to circumvent an issue that it itself runs into, that will break things, foundational things. Stuff like auth can be easily broken by these things, right? Like, it finds this weird bug that it has in its own code, and it then writes a static auth observer or a static auth client that will literally just hard code users into plain text, so that it goes around, it circumvents the idea of having to do a database and a backend authentication. But the auth will still work to the end user. It'll just work in a really, really poor way. These are like examples that I'm just saying that it could happen for people that are creating this vibe coding stuff and creating these weird projects that they think can be intentionally created and put out there to the public, but really can't. And they don't have the ability to evaluate that. So it's a really timely time to talk about the foundational knowledge because on the one hand, I think it's becoming almost harder to get it versus, and the reason I say it's almost harder to get is because there's just so many shortcuts you can take.
I was gonna say it's really the temptation, like I said,
Yes.
like the temptation to jump in at step 10 of 50
Yes.
is super high. It's like, why wouldn't you want to start? That's so like that's from a productivity standpoint, that sounds fantastic.
The problem is that the weird thing is if I was coming into the industry right now, I would take the shortcut. I
And
can
I feel like I would too, yeah.
I can pretty confidently say that. I would take the shortcut because I took the shortcuts of the best videos, like watching the videos quickly. I took as many shortcuts as I possibly could. Now, having said that, my shortcuts were very limited because of when I started coding. So I still had to learn a lot of foundational knowledge. But I didn't open up a textbook and read the textbook and then try to implement what the textbook said. I chose the easiest path forward.
Would you say though, like just hang on one second, I'm just gonna ask you a question there. Would you say though that your potential is limited unless you learn that like you learn back? Like sure, like jump in at step 5, jump in at step 10 of 50, right? But as you continue through the stages, you still learn steps 1 through 9. Like slowly through again through osmosis or whatever. Like you still care about like, man, I keep seeing this if thing. What is that?
Yeah, I mean, I think I did go back and learn some things here and there that I really needed at that very current moment, right? So I did still probably gain a lot of more foundational knowledge due to that, but I only did it when I really needed it. And so like I think it would probably be the same thing where I would skip a bunch of steps now way more steps than before. And then as I needed it, I would go back. The problem is that the gap now isn't I'm not skipping 9 steps or 8 steps. I'm skipping 82 steps. And to go back to step 1 if I need it is almost impossible because of the amount of knowledge that you need all those steps back. Right? So I think for me personally, I might have gotten so frustrated with that gap that I might have been bounced out of the industry. Like that's honestly like the take that I have. Like I don't think I could have done it if I started today, which is weird to say because I think I'm in a pretty good spot now where like I can call myself a senior developer, but I also know my shortcomings. And one of those is really looking for shortcuts when I shouldn't be looking for shortcuts.
Like let me mention this too. So like, obviously it sounds hypocritical for us both to say, hey, we're probably going to take the shortcuts if we were starting today, but yet we're still preaching like, hey, like, do as I say, not as I do, and like learn the 3 pillars. I think that the 3 pillars is probably, and like this is just our opinion, this isn't like the end all be all. I feel like they're still, and learning the fundamentals, like I still want to get that through people's heads. When I say fundamentals, it's not just HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. It's thinking like a computer does. Understanding like the basic the cornerstones of like arrays and decision making and all these other things. Like, and then algorithms start coming in, which is a more advanced topic and things like that. Like thinking like a computer, breaking down problems, then taking those problems, potentially breaking them down further, or at the very least applying computational like thinking, I'm going to call that computational thinking, like concepts, programmatic concepts to solve those problems. Like this is like that type of stuff is really crucial. And a lot of the times when you learn, like when people say they're learning like a programming language, they're thinking it's all syntax, but really like they should be learning like the concepts as well. Like hence the whole story about QBasic and Visual Basic, right? To bring it back to that. But this is the thing is like Mike's right in that there's shortcuts to be taken. And because there's shortcuts, or not because there's shortcuts to be taken, but there's money to be had if you're ahead of the game. And so people are going to take those shortcuts in order to make money. People who want a job quickly, they're going to go down the quickest thing. Now I'm going to say something, and I don't know if this applies necessarily to programming. We can discuss this. It's going to sound off topic, but I don't think it is. And it's recently my golf game. So for years, I'm on year 4, season 4 of playing golf. And the thing is I, for years, for those 4 years, or I guess 3 and some, was just taking concepts at face value. People would give me tips and tricks, and I would apply those tips and tricks. And I built a golf swing based on that. Now, if you don't play golf, you think, oh, it's just a golf swing. There's about 4.5 million ways to do things, and it's actually extremely complicated. And then it's a super mental sport. And you got to make decisions. It's actually very difficult. Like, it's extremely difficult, way more difficult than I thought it'd ever be. And this year, I started doing way better. And the reason why I started doing way better is not because I threw all those tips and tricks in the garbage. What I started doing was I said, I'm sick and tired of doing tips and tricks. Because what's happening is I'm forgetting the tips and tricks. Or one person says, look left, the other person says look right, and they're controversial. Or I'm getting, 8, 9, 10 different tips and tricks for each different type of club. And then I'm forgetting, one of 9 steps, and it's screwing my whole thing up, and now I don't know how to fix it. So what's effectively happened is I'm able to play golf, I'm able to do half decently, but I'm not really understanding what I'm doing. And so what I started doing this year is I said, all right, the heck with this. I'm going to start studying this stuff. And I mean studying it. Going in and being like, all right, what's the grip do to the golf swing? Why am I hooking to the left? Why am I slicing to the right? Why am I doing this? Why am I doing that? And I'm not just looking for the quick fix. And there's a lot of those on YouTube where they'll be like, hey man, like this is how you fix your slice. Is it? Because there's three or four reasons why a slice can happen. And now I understand that. And I'm just getting started, right? I'm not saying I'm the golf god. But my point is now I'm understanding those base concepts. And when I'm out in the field, just this time, I was trying one thing, thought, like for this course, I don't know if this method really works. And I switched mid-game. And everyone always says that's a killer. And it wasn't. I did great. And I honestly think it's a killer because people are trying to apply the tips and tricks. And they're trying to remember the 9 or 10 steps. Yeah, there are 9 or 10 steps. But if I understand what's going on, I'm able to just do that thing. Like humans are complex. Like we do a lot of complex things. There's a lot of stuff going on, But if I understand what I'm doing, I'm able to just do the goal. And not always. It's not always going to be perfect. My point is my potential was limited. You may do amazing and you may always do better than me if you're a person that's amazing at memorization and you found the tips and tricks that work for you. I'll tell you that right now. And in the same way as a programmer, you may have taken all the shortcuts and you may have gotten into a position where you're able to do whatever. You're able to do your job at a senior or junior or whatever level, or DevRel, doesn't matter. Maybe that's where you're at, but I would argue to say that your potential may be limited in the same way that my golf swing was limited. By you understanding programmatic concepts, understanding the 3 pillars, HTML, CSS, and JavaScript, and understanding what you're actually doing, I would argue your potential is higher. And I saw this in the IT field, where we would be taught a procedure on how to do something. This is how you fix this. This is the procedure. Okay. So everyone does this procedure. And then one day that procedure stops working. And what happens? The senior tech on the team, and he was promoted to senior tech, by the way, comes in, says, oh yeah, that procedure is not going to work because it's a 1 in a 100 chance, but this one registry thing's broken. And so even that got me thinking back in the day. That's over 10 years ago. And I started thinking to myself, it's kind of interesting that he's the tech lead and he understands that. It kind of sounds like it makes sense, but also, is that how he got there? I never asked him. Maybe I should have. But is that how he got there? Because we're all following a procedure that likely he had a hand in either enforcing or writing. Because there was a lot of stuff written by our tech leads that would be like, for quick and effective IT. And we were operating, not at level 1. We were operating at level 2 to 4 on our team in terms of IT level. But was that guy promoted because he understands, the top of the tree, level 7 or whatever? Because I know corporations define IT differently. And so that's like a thing that I think maybe could potentially be happening here, is that, yeah, you can go and get your job and you can go do this and that. But I honestly wonder if the maximum potential is hindered because you don't understand all the concepts. It'd be like Mike, like you remember this. This is a story from our college. There was a person that got to the 3rd or 4th semester, which was pretty freaking difficult. And then we started doing computer courses because we had a mix of electrical courses and all this other thing. And you didn't really need to know that much about computers, which sounds ridiculous, but it was a lot of electrical, little microelectronics, 5 volts, maybe 12 volts at most. You're playing with circuits and you're doing a lot of math, right? And you're doing networking stuff. And then all of a sudden we needed to do servers. Well, servers require, especially since we were learning Windows Server at that particular time, it was a split Windows server. Mike's shaking his head. He knows the story. What I'm going to say. Person in our class didn't know what the start menu was. And the teacher's like, go to the start menu. He's like, what? The thing in the bottom left. What? No idea. And this is Windows 7. So and now I know the start menu centered or whatever. I understand that. Back then it was always in the bottom left and always had been. And that person didn't understand that. That is an example of someone who is competent. They're not stupid, but they didn't understand Windows. Maybe they only used Mac and they had no idea, and they're just like, "Oh, whatever, like, it should be okay." It's like, shouldn't you learn a little of everything? Isn't that limiting your potential? And that day it limited her potential.
Yeah, it's I remember that moment. It was very, very vividly because unfortunately she was gone right after that class. Like
Yeah.
she
Oh,
just
yeah.
immediately dropped out, which is really unfortunate considering how far she got. I think she did transfer over to a program that probably suited her better, but still, it's I want to play devil's advocate a little bit. Okay. I think the idea is that the foundational knowledge is really important. And right now, I very much agree with that because of what I was saying before. Like I without foundational knowledge, I wouldn't be able to do what I'm doing now, which is using an agent properly and being able to review its code. Like it takes a long time. Like like reviewing code takes a long time, but it's worth it because it I don't have to at least write the code, right? Like it's fine. The problem becomes what happens a year from now or 2 years from now. If you go and spend all this time learning the foundational knowledge, and you do that outside of the time that you could be spending on learning how to prompt better and learning how to use these agents better and staying up to date with the latest AI tools that are coming out and the LLMs that are being produced, right? You don't keep up with that because you're learning the foundational knowledge, right? Let's say that that's the case. Maybe you can learn both. That's great. We all have limited amounts of time, especially for learning. If that's the case, and a year from now, the LLMs do become better and they're able to do this significantly better, and you weren't learning the tool that is the thing that all the professionals are using right now, you might be behind.
Right.
So, and this is a theoretical, and I want to say that I don't really support this concept of like not learning the foundational stuff because right now I know you need it 100% to be able to create like a good product. You need the foundational
Because
knowledge, period.
the AI can't be trusted effectively.
Exactly. That's exactly it. But my worry is that if we say that and then people go down the line of like, oh, I'm only learning foundational knowledge and they don't pay attention to the tools, they might be moved out of the industry as well because we don't know the progress that's going to happen, right? Like I have access like on a day-to-day basis. One day I will be like, okay, we need coding. Like this is, the AI does something stupid. So like we really need coding. That happens to me all the time. And then another day it does something crazy that I would have never been able to do without it. And I'm like, oh, damn it. Like maybe we don't. And that happens to me on a day-to-day basis. Every day I flip-flop between those two. I don't know what's going to happen in a year from now. So like I really think there's a lot of value in learning to use the tools. I think there's a lot of value to learning the foundational stuff. And because of all this, like it's just a really difficult time for newbies to get into development, in my opinion, because we don't know where it's going. We don't know if we're going to be replaced or not, or if we are replaced, in what way. Like I think realistically, you'll just be using the tools more effectively that are given to you, and you'll just be able to do more with them and stuff like that. Like just like with all other revolutions that have happened in the
What's
space.
funny though is I hear other people spit in the face of that theory, and they say that people who say that we're not going to be replaced are just hopefuls.
Absolutely, copium. Yeah, it's copium or hopium or whatever you call it. Yeah, absolutely. I've heard that argument as well many times. I like to stay somewhere in the middle of it just because we don't know, and I like
Life is usually a gray area when it comes to this type of stuff.
correct.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I do understand their thoughts as well. Like the cope, it is maybe a little bit of copium because
Yeah.
again, I'm using these tools very heavily right now, especially the last 3-4 weeks, and they can do things that I did not think they could do. Let me put it that way. Like they have a lot. I have maybe it's going to be out at this time already. When this blog podcast comes out, I'm going to have a blog post on htmlthings.com where I talk about all this. Like I talk about what my feelings are towards AI, what I've learned in the past, month of using all the different tools, Claude Code, Cursor, VS Code, Copilot, Agent, like all these different tools that I've been using heavily in my regular workflows, what I'm feeling. And honestly, like it's both amazing and both terrible, obviously, but it's also just making me think about what the future has in store for this stuff. That's really where my head's at. Like right now, like I said, foundational knowledge, absolutely necessary to build a good product. 100%. You could build a POC without it, 100%, sure. You cannot build a production ready, production grade product without the foundational knowledge of code at least.
Right.
But again, it's just I flip-flop all the freaking time about if we're gonna need that in a year. And that's what I want to warn people about. That's my devil's advocate play, is that like I really want you to take these tools seriously. I don't want you to be like, oh, I'm only going to learn the foundational stuff because that's going to matter in the future more than the actual tools. I don't think that's going to be the case. I think there's a very good world where both will matter, and that's probably going to be where we're at, and that's why we're talking about this right now. But there is a world where the tools will matter more than the foundational knowledge.
Well, like the thing here too is like let's I mean it's a big part of what you're saying, but let's remove AI from it for 1 second and let's like review what we're talking about here. Let me ask you a question. AI doesn't exist, period. We're still Googling things, we're still Stack Overflowing, we're still doing all this, but web development has still reached the complexity that it has today. Are you going to take the shortcuts? Are you going to learn the 3 pillars? Because there's going to be people there right now that are going to be like, I want the textbook. It's almost like a utopian idea, right? For you to understand every concept perfectly, right? Like, you know, understand the 3 pillars, understand programmatic concepts, understand all this stuff, really dive into everything. It's like, yeah, but there's the reality of time as well. There's the reality of the market, job market. There's the reality of like, hey, like other people are going to be using AI stuff. But let's kill that AI argument for 1 second and just look at the complexity of web development now. Like web development can be easy using tools that are not AI. Like you can use WordPress and you can use no-code tools and things like that. You can use those things. You can use guides and copy and paste code and get pretty far. Even if you can't really read it, you can get pretty far. Like, you know, asterisk, maybe like 18 asterisks, but still. But the point is, like, starting today, someone today says, I want to become a web developer. You know what? I'm sick of not understanding this stuff. Like, or like, I'm sick of like the websites that are out there. I have a different idea. They're an idea person. I have this idea for a web app or a website, and I want to build this thing out. And they're an AI like an anti-AI person. Let's just say they're an anti-AI person, just straight up. So where do they start? Even if they're a person that wants a job, maybe it's 2 questions, but even if they're a person that wants a job and they say, I'm an anti-AI person, just pretend the AI doesn't exist. Because of the complexity, just purely the complexity of web development today, because a lot of people out there are going to be rolling their eyes saying like AI just comes up way too much. Keep accidentally saying it. It's ridiculous. But like concepts, like a lot of people are going to say like, oh, like, you know, Matt, you just need to like practice and like you'll be able to understand all this stuff. It's like, yeah, but you built up that knowledge. Standing again at rung 1 of a 500 step ladder is pretty freaking daunting, especially when you're not running up that thing.
The web development landscape right now is extraordinarily complicated. It is.
I agree.
The amount of tooling that you need to know, the amount of different DevOps stuff that you need to know, the force factor of like, hey, you need to know full stack development now, not just front end development, which is what we learned, but full stack development. You need to know servers. You need to know DevOps. You need to know, like, there's just, the expectations are almost getting unrealistic. Not almost, they are unrealistic for the most part. And I can't imagine a non-AI, like someone that just refuses AI today, having the uphill battle that they're going to have moving forward. Like
but like if you had that battle, would you take a shortcut? Would you say, oh, I'm just going to start Googling React right away? Just use React as an example because
well,
it's like
I did
super
take
popular.
that shortcut. I did take that shortcut
Without AI. Like you would say, I'm just going to learn React right now. Like screw the 3 pillars, screw understanding everything in the background. I'm going to go straight for, you know, I want to build this project, or I want to get this job. You're going to go straight for the goal and not.
I think so. I think today, standing where I'm at today, I'm not saying that this is like good advice, maybe, but what I'm trying to put out there is like, what I would do in that situation is I would try to build using the technologies that I think are most popular, or that I Google are most popular, and work my way back a little bit from there, that I need what I need to do. Because like if you learn React, you're probably going to end up learning HTML to a certain degree with JSX. You're going to end up learning CSS, maybe with Tailwind, maybe with not. I don't know, depending on what article you're looking at or what guide you're looking at. And you're going to learn JavaScript, obfuscated away a little bit, but a lot of what React is just JavaScript, really. So you're going to learn the 3 pillars while learning React at the same time anyway. and I've seen this argument said many, many times, and I'm kind of starting to agree with it, that I don't know the value if you're looking for creating a product or creating a project really quickly that you want to create, or looking for a job. I don't know if it's valuable today, talking no AI, to just jump into the foundational knowledge. Again, this is for me. I want to be very clear, is like I'm very much like I need to do something with my hands to learn, right? Like I need to jump into something.
You're an anti
And
Ricky Bobby.
I'm an anti Ricky Bobby. I know what to do with my hands, but like I need to jump in. I need to learn stuff, and I like to learn. I like to learn using like kind of the latest tools that are available to me at that point in time. So I'll look for a guide that's probably dated within the past 3 months. That's kind of my where I look for, and that's what it probably is going to be React, because that's what's going to be there. And I'll look to build an app straight like zero to React. There will probably be a lot of foundational knowledge that I'll learn through that, and then whatever I don't learn, it will hinder me to a certain degree because I won't know the separation between React and JavaScript, for instance, that well.
Which
And
is a
that's what I
big
keep.
thing that I struggle with. Like it
Correct.
kind of pisses me off, to be honest.
Correct. And it's the same thing with like Tailwind and CSS. If I jump into Tailwind before CSS, I'll have the exact same struggle with that, right? I'll have struggles, but I'll probably identify those struggles and then back learn those things as I need them. Because how I jumped into web development. At the time when we were jumping into web development, honestly, the frameworks like Angular was out there, but it was touted as like more of an enterprise thing, not really like a startup-y thing, or not really like this big thing. We were pushed into, at the time, JavaScript. The guides that I was looking at the time when I was starting were JavaScript guides.
Yep.
And that's why I went into JavaScript, and that's why I've told people to go into JavaScript, because it worked for me. But the reality is, if I was starting today, that's not going to be the case most likely when I look for what to learn. And so I will inherently go into React most likely and learn it, and then back learn as need be, and that would be fine. I think that you would get to a good level. There would just be a few hurdles you have to go through, like the separation between the framework and the language and stuff like that. But I think you could get there.
And like you're talking in a realistic view. Like
Yes,
obviously in a utopian view would be like, yeah, I'm going to start at square one. I'm going to learn
absolutely.
programmatic concepts. I'm not even going to look at 3 pillars of HTML, CSS. I'm
Yep.
not even going to look at those. And then I'll learn HTML, CSS, JavaScript. And then I'll learn this, and then I'll learn this, and you would build. That's a utopian, like I'll get, advanced understanding, or like at least fair understanding of each of these things, and I'll go through and do it. And that's almost like a traditional school way of teaching, although like yes and no. Like sometimes schools kind of just assume some stuff, because like there are concepts that are just like so complex where it's like, yo, we can't be starting at square one of 700. Also, another thing I was going to say is, I wonder if like the complexity of the complexity of web development is what kind of really promotes AI. Like, AI can help with something as simple as writing a social media post. Obviously, like a masterfully crafted social media post can be difficult. But in terms of just like doing it as a consumer, like, hey, I went on a trip, no one's putting that into, ChatGPT and be like, yo, write this thing better. The person who's just sharing it with their family and friends is just gonna be like, yo, I went on a trip, here's 4 pictures. You know what I mean? Like the concept is still really easy. But the very fact that people are using, and not just with web development, with programming in general, the very fact that people are using AI so much indicates, I would say, a level of complexity there. And we've talked about this for years, where we have constantly preached the 3 pillars: HTML, CSS, JavaScript. Learn them, then go elsewhere. And we've done roadmaps in the past and roadmaps here and there and everything. And now I honestly feel like for the first time, there's a crack in the 3 pillars. I don't think they're gone. I think there's a crack in them, because now it's like, well, the 3 pillars is 200 steps behind. It used
Yep.
to be 30, then it was 50, then it was, I'm just throwing out rudimentary numbers. But then it's like, well, like, remember all these products, and remember this and remember that. Like, even selecting a product now online, like if you're like, yo, I want to, host my database or whatever. Back in the day, it was just sort of like, well, I got to use friggin' cPanel hosting, maybe Plesk at most, or dedicated, where I'm going to go in and use use like just the terminal on a Linux box, right? Something like that. Like those were more or less your choices, and they were all from the same place. They were all from the same traditional host, is what we've called them in the past. The same traditional host, which still exists and are still massively popular. But the thing is like now it's like, well, no, like I'm using these people for auth, and I'm paying these other people for databases, and I'm paying these other people for these plugins, and this is where like some budgets have blown out of proportion as well. I think we've talked about this in the past with like WordPress, but this is like true now in general, where like you and I had talked about how there's so many freaking products out there. When you bring up a product name, I don't know what you're talking about half the time. And you do the same to me because I can't remember all these products. Like there's so many ways to solve a problem. It's like these people will host my databases. These people will do my hosting. These people will host this. These people will serve that. I'm using this as my payment handler, but that goes through this other thing. It's like, holy, like just in Canada, like just as a basic example, a very popular payment processing person or handler, whatever you want to call them, is Moneris. A common e-commerce setup is to set up WordPress, then WooCommerce, not done, then an add-on to WooCommerce to allow Moneris. Then you got to go and make sure your Moneris is enabled for online and all that. Make sure your account's all in, good standing and all that. Get it all set up. And then you type in all your stuff. You do your setup in Moneris in that plugin of a plugin on top of a thing that needs to be hosted. That is something that we did almost, 6-7 years ago for some clients. And that's still, used today, as far as I know. And that is already several steps in. And notice I never mentioned the word HTML, CSS, JavaScript. I didn't even mention PHP. Then the complexity starts. And it's like, then the complexity starts? Where do I make this thing live? Like, what's hosting? You know what I mean? Like web development has really, like, obviously there's ways to simplify it, but web development really has gotten so complex that we're at a bit of a crossroads as to whether like fundamental knowledge, like I think at this point, like there is a crack in the 3 pillars, like I mentioned. I think that programmatic understanding of how to break down problems is probably still very vital, because it doesn't matter what coding language I approach something from. Like if I decide to jump into React tomorrow, I'm still going to jump at it with the idea that I'm like, oh, I need these to be like modular because I want this to be an if and this to be that and this to be a loop. Like not having that knowledge, I think, is really crucial. And actually, kind of, I guess as a closing statement for myself, but it's like kind of like a major failure of our college, Mike, is they just kind of taught us syntax short of one course where like kind of one of the instructors kind of took it over and was like, no, like you guys have to understand what the heck's going on here. But we never learned programmatic, like computational fundamentals of like breaking a problem down and doing all that stuff. Like I've said a few times this episode, we've never learned that. And you saw the people struggle. Like for me, easy, did it in high school. I think you did in high school, easy. Bunch of other people, easy. But like, or at the very least, you had like some knowledge of it, I think. But there were people where it was like deer in the headlights, where they have like 80s across, 80+% in all their courses, which is great, A to A plus in a bunch of their courses. They get to this simple, realistically programming course, and they're like, what are you doing? It's like, oh, I'm just like looping through, like, I'm iterating through this array. They're like, what are you talking about? And it's like, oh, this array, blah, blah, blah. And so they start learning the syntax, and it's like, well, we are going to use a couple different programming languages in this program over the next couple of years. So like, you really should learn what an array is, not what this, like just C is, like just how like C, the programming language C, how it declares arrays. You should learn what an array is. And it's sort of like, oh, right. There's none of that fundamental knowledge.
Yeah. I think honestly, until I took a data structures and algorithms course, which taught me exactly what you're saying, like what an array is, how it works, what a linked list is, what a loop is, how it works, like how an if statement actually works. Well, actually, the data structures and algorithms course tied to our embedded electronics course, because the way I learned loops is actually through transistors. And the way I learned, like,
you connected those
if statements especially is through transistors, right? Like through the ors and the ands and like all the comparators that we learned inside of embedded
the logic gates, the logic gates.
Yeah, all the logic gates is how really, that's where my fundamental knowledge of programming comes from, because that's like the foundational, like that's how the zeros and ones are working, right? Like they're at the transistor level. And thankfully, we learned that, and that gave me a really, really good foundation to take to the next level, which is like a little bit more complicated, But until I learned like data structures and algorithms, I didn't really understand a lot of the concepts like an array. they didn't really make sense to me other than the fact that there's a bunch of shit stored in it and I don't really know how to access it, right? Like,
Right.
and then we learned C, like accessing different points in it. And like, I think that was really foundational and fundamental to me being a decent programmer down the line. And I'm thankful for that. But you're right that 90% of the courses that we took was like, hey, here's some syntax, just copy paste it into the field. And this is how it kind of works. And that was completely useless. So it's just, and I think a lot of people have that experience. Like now, I think courses are starting to become better. I think like at least the average course is starting to become better in teaching that kind of stuff. But again, like bring back AI, but like AI changes that landscape. Like being able to take shortcuts. If I had ChatGPT in high school or in college, I don't know, like I would probably learn a lot less.
Let me tell you this: I'd be slinging mobile apps like it wouldn't even be funny. Like,
Yeah.
I maybe not successfully. Like, obviously, a lot of mobile apps failed even back then.
Yeah.
I'd be like, mobile apps were the hot thing at the time, and they were not easy to make. You got an AI, it's like, I mean, a course. So you're in school. It's like a course. Like you take every shortcut you can in classes. You know, a lot of students won't do that, but a lot of students certainly will. And like, I mean, of course, like you're in school, it'll be like, man, I'm like super into this electronics thing and this coding thing and all this like tech stuff, and apps are super hot, and I'm able to use an AI to help me do this. I'll tell you right now, I'll be slinging apps like I mean, I've figured 40 apps. I would have 40 defunct apps right now.
I mean, that'd be sick. Like that's how you learn, right? You build apps, you fix them, you break them and stuff like that. So that would actually be a really good outcome of that.
Right.
I think the outcome that I fear for a lot of people out there is that they're just going to take the shortcut and not do anything with it. So for instance, like learn how to, you have to learn how to do a loop. They'll just type it into ChatGPT, you regurgitate the answer on a test and call it a day. Right. Like they'll get the code to do a loop. They'll get the explanation to do a loop that they can put on the test, et cetera, et cetera. Like they just have to memorize it. Now they could do that before with a textbook. It's just easier now. Like there's just an easier way to do that. And the easier you make it, the less incentive they have to actually go out and learn it. There's kind of two outcomes that I see is either you use the AI to give you that foundational knowledge better because it can now talk to you in a way that you understand rather than like the professor just doing a generalized discussion on it. So that's the positive. Like that's the, the glass half full method. The glass half empty method is like, you're just going to rely on it as a huge crutch, not as a tool, but as a literal crutch, and have it do everything for you to the point where you just can't even answer a simple question. Yeah.
I mean, you and I were discussing that you could actually get an AI to help you. Like when I talk to it about programming concepts, there's exceptions to this rule, but I will generally say, hey, I don't know how to do this. I need this explained to me as a beginner, and I want it explained. Like, obviously, I have a better prompt than that, but it's like, I want this explained as I want to understand what's going on.
Yeah.
And I'll warn it sometimes. I'll be like, sometimes I'm going to ask you a question about a specific line. Like, I'm going to be like, what in the heck are you doing here? And explain how this works and why the heck were you doing it this way? All right. And then sometimes I find inefficiencies that way. It's just like, oh, I looped through it 84 times. It's like, well, there's 4 options. Why do you do that 84 times? It's like, yeah, it worked, but 84, like 80, 90 times, man. Hopefully some Canadian out there gets that reference. But but no one gets that reference. Someone does,
no,
please.
Someone will for sure get that reference. It's a big enough cultural thing, not even Canadian. It's in the US too. People will get that reference. I guarantee it.
Yeah, so comment on our show somewhere. Yeah, just like let us know because I want to know if anyone got that. But yeah, no, I don't know about you, Mike. I think that just about rounds it up. Also, not selfishly, I have a carpool arriving and it just arrived early, so that's fine. They're early. They said to chill, but that concludes this episode. I mean, I had like a really strictly scripted episode show note, which I'll still put in there, but I'll probably put a disclaimer because we just kind of went not off the rails. Like we covered a lot of stuff on here, but it's just not in this order kind of thing. But this is a really good conversational episode because it's super topical. Like I'm doing WordPress stuff right now. Mike's doing custom code stuff right now. And we're both having the same freaking issue. And so it's like, it's wide reaching. It's a huge issue. And I want to get your guys' opinions on this stuff. Like, learn fundamentals, don't learn fundamentals, learn HTML, CSS, JavaScript. Are they still pillars? Are they cracked? All that stuff. And when I say cracked, not like, isn't that what the young kids say when they're like, this is like great? I mean, like there's like, I have a cement pillar and it's cracked now. So that's not good. Is the structural integrity of the 3 pillars under threat? That's way too formal. Anyway, Remember that if you want to support episodes like this, we are on Patreon. That's patreon.com/HTML all the things. And many thanks to our $3 tier patrons. Tim from The Web Hacker on thewebhacker.com. Jason from Geek Life Radio via geekliferadio.com. Garrett Segal, Level Up Financial Planning via www.levelupfinancialplanning.com. Magnus from YesWeb via yesweb.se. Syntaxify from the HTML All the Things Discord server. And Stacey Mossler from the website swoonworthydesigns.com. And remember, this episode has been powered by CodeRabbit. That's some AI code review goodness for you. You can go check it out. CodeRabbit.ai. Get a free trial, 14-day free trial, no credit card needed. 2 clicks, sign up with a GitHub or GitLab account. And if you want to let them know that we sent you, this is not an affiliate code. It just lets them know that we sent you. You can click the link in the show description or in the show notes on htmlallthethings.com. And remember, we also have an up to 20% off Scrimba affiliate link. If you want to learn how to code with their interactive media player code editor, please do so. Go check that out. That link will be in the show description and in the show notes on htmlallthethings.com. And last but not least, we'd like to give a shout out to Michael LaRocca, a contributing author on htmlallthethings.com. Michael is the author of Self-Taught the X Generation blog at selftaughttxg.com. Feel free to leave a comment or review in the platform that you are listening to this on. And this outro will sign us off.
You've been listening to HTML All the Things podcast. Web development, web design, and small business. We hope you've gotten some useful and practical information from this show. And we hope you appreciate that we talk to you like human beings. And we hope you had some fun. We'll be back soon. But in the meantime, hit us up on social media on Facebook, Instagram, and Patreon at HTML All the Things. And on Twitter at HTML Everything. Until next time, this is HTML All the Things, signing off.